I'd found the forgery on Amber's marriage contract less than 10 minutes ago, and now the growl of Francesco Bernardi's motorcade was vibrating through the floor of my father's study, making it impossible to ignore what was about to walk through that door. The air shifted first. My stepmother's hand froze on her teacup. Giovanni, my father's second-in-command, straightened in his chair so violently the leather creaked. Even Amber, who'd been smirking at me from her perch on the settee, already playing the martyred bride, went chalk white. Then he appeared in the doorway, tall, dark suit that moved like it was tailored directly onto muscle and threat. Face carved from something that had never known mercy. But it wasn't his appearance that hit me first. It was the way he looked at the room, like he was calculating exit trajectories and identifying who would bleed first if things went sideways. My pulse hammered against my throat. Heat crawled up my neck. I hated my body for the reaction. Hated that after years of being the invisible daughter, the one who lived in ledgers and shipping manifests, I couldn't control this. But I kept my feet planted and my hands steady on the parchment in front of me. His gaze swept the room, landed on me, held. Every survival instinct I'd honed over 26 years screamed at me to look away, to shrink, to become the shadow I'd perfected in this house. But I'd spent the last 8 minutes staring at Amber's clumsy forgery work, at the signature that wasn't my father's, and something in me refused to disappear. Before we go any further, if you're already hooked, hit that subscribe button right now because what Francesco does next is going to shock you. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know if you're Team Miriam or if you think she's making the biggest mistake of her life. Alright, back to the story. Miriam Moretti. His voice was low, controlled, and it landed somewhere behind my sternum. Not a question. A confirmation. Yes. I was proud my voice didn't shake. He moved into the room. 2 men followed, silent as executioners, flanking him in a choreography that spoke of violence as routine. But I couldn't look at them. Francesco Bernardi took up all the available oxygen. You're aware of the terms. It wasn't a question either, but I answered anyway. I am now. His eyes narrowed fractionally. Now. I lifted the parchment, forced my hand not to tremble through sheer force of will. This blood oath addendum was filed with the Bernardi family office 4 hours ago. I saw it for the first time 9 minutes ago. Miriam. My father's voice cracked from his wheelchair near the window. His skin had that grayish tint it always got when the heart medication wasn't enough anymore. One hand pressed to his chest. Don't. Papa, don't. I didn't take my eyes off Francesco. Not now. Francesco moved closer. 3 deliberate steps. He stopped at the opposite side of the mahogany desk, and even with 4 feet of antique wood between us, I felt the heat radiating off him like a furnace. Explain, he said. I inhaled slowly, centering myself in the numbers, the facts, the patterns that had always made sense when people didn't. The original blood oath contract named Amber as collateral against my father's shipping partnership with your family. This addendum replaces her name with mine. I tilted the document toward the lamplight. But the signature authenticating the change isn't my father's. Silence. Amber made a small, strangled sound. That's insane. Papa signed it. He wanted to protect me. He didn't. I met Francesco's gaze head-on. This was what I was good at. Finding the discrepancies. Tracing the problems. Speaking in facts when everyone else was drowning in panic. The loop on the capital M is wrong. My father signs with a closed loop. This one's open. I rotated the parchment slightly. And the ink. It's fresh. Less than 6 hours old. This was drawn up this morning. Francesco's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his stillness. A coiling, like a predator recalculating. He looked at one of his men. Luca. The man moved forward, took the document from my hands. His fingers brushed mine. Barely contact, nothing more. But I felt Francesco's attention sharpen on that point of touch like a scalpel. Luca studied the addendum for exactly 12 seconds. She's right. Recent ink. The family seal's authentic, but the signature's off. Wrong pressure points. Francesco's gaze cut to Amber. She went from pale to translucent. This is ridiculous. Why would I? Because the ghost shipment hit the port last night, I said quietly, keeping my voice clinical factual. And the blood oath clause triggers immediately upon evidence of breach. You knew they'd come for collateral within 24 hours. I watched her face. Watched the micro-expressions I'd learned to read after a lifetime of being invisible in a house where my stepmother and her daughter treated me like particularly useful furniture. Guilt, panic, and underneath it, calculation. She'd done this. Forged the addendum. Thrown me into the fire to save herself. The shipment, Francesco said. His voice was quieter now, and somehow that made it infinitely worse. 300 kilos of unaccounted cargo. Port access logged under Moretti Logistics credentials. Security footage shows your father's keycard. His entry code. He wasn't there. I forced myself to keep meeting his eyes even though my pulse was screaming. Papa's been home for 3 weeks. Complete bed rest after the cardiac procedure. Doctor's orders. That's not what the logs show. Then someone used his credentials. Who? The question hung in the air like a blade suspended over all our necks. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But I could feel the shape of it, the pattern that didn't fit, the clean precision of a setup. Someone who knew the systems. Someone with access. I don't know, I said. But I can find out. Francesco tilted his head fractionally. Can you? It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Give me access to the port logs, the security footage, the internal keycard records for the last 3 months. I'll map the pattern. I'll find your mole. Why would I do that? Because you don't actually think my father betrayed you. I held his gaze, even as my heart tried to claw its way out of my chest. If you did, we'd already be dead. Silence stretched. My father made a small, broken sound. Amber was frozen, her face a mask of badly concealed terror. Francesco studied me. I felt his attention like a physical thing, heavy, assessing, impossibly focused. Then he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who'd just found something unexpected and was deciding whether to keep it or break it. You're clever, he said softly. That's dangerous. So is making blood oath contracts with families you haven't fully vetted. I shouldn't have said it. Every survival instinct I possessed screamed at me to shut up, to make myself small and harmless and forgettable. But I was so tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of fixing everyone's disasters while they took credit or threw me under the wheels when it suited them. And some reckless part of me, the part that had been dormant for 26 years, wanted to see what he'd do. His smile widened fractionally. Luca. Giovanni. Out. The room emptied in seconds. My father tried to stand from his wheelchair, but Francesco's gaze flicked to him and he sank back down. Then we were alone. Me, Francesco, Amber, and my father. Francesco moved not toward me, but toward Amber. She made a small noise and tried to back away, but he was faster. He stopped 6 inches from her, and I watched her crumble under the weight of his presence. Did you forge the document? His voice was almost gentle. No, I didn't, I would never. Wrong answer. She broke. It wasn't supposed to. I didn't think you'd check. Julian said the family seal was all that mattered. That you'd never. She stopped. Francesco went very, very still. Julian, he repeated, his voice dropping to something subterranean. Julian Carvello, my family's lawyer. Amber's face confirmed everything. Francesco turned to look at me. His expression was unreadable, but there was something new in his eyes. Something calculating and cold and almost impressed. It seems, he said quietly, you've just become significantly more valuable than a forged bride. Francesco's words hung in the air like a verdict. You've just become significantly more valuable than a forged bride. Then let's negotiate terms, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. His eyebrow lifted fractionally. You think you're in a position to negotiate? I think you need what's in my head more than you need a decorative wife. I gestured to Amber, who was still trembling against the wall. She would have given you nothing but liability. I can give you answers. Francesco studied me for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. He typed something, then pocketed it. The car leaves in 5 minutes. Bring nothing but yourself. My father will receive the finest cardiac care available. I'll have a medical team here within the hour. His gaze was cold, calculating. Consider it a down payment on your cooperation. I want it in writing. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or respect. You don't trust my word? I don't trust anyone's word without documentation. I met his stare. That's what makes me good at what I do. He smiled then, sharp as broken glass. Luca, bring the car around. And call Dr. Russo. Tell him it's a priority case. The limousine smelled like leather and something darker. Gun oil, maybe, or the residue of controlled violence. I sat across from Francesco, the privacy partition raised, sealing us in a cocoon of tinted glass and uncomfortable silence. He pulled a folder from the side compartment. Inside was a blood oath contract, the real one this time, with official Bernardi letterhead and a wax seal that looked like it had been pressed by something ancient and unforgiving. Sign, he said, placing it on the seat between us. I picked it up, read every line. Standard terms for a mafia marriage contract. Lifelong bond, no dissolution without commission approval, breach punishable by death. The collateral clause was there too. My life as insurance against my father's cooperation. I need amendments, I said. His jaw tightened. You're testing my patience. I'm protecting my interests. I pulled a pen from my jacket pocket. I always carried one, a habit from years of catching accounting errors no one else noticed. Article 7. I want medical care for my father added as a guaranteed provision, not a courtesy. Cardiac specialists, medications, hospice care if it comes to that. All costs assumed by the Bernardi family. Done. What else? Article 12. The collateral clause. I want it expanded. If I'm killed or harmed while working to clear my father's name, the debt transfers to whoever ordered the hit. Even if it's someone in your organization. Francesco leaned back, his expression unreadable. You think I'd kill you after bringing you into my home? I think you'd kill me if you thought I was a threat. I kept my voice level, clinical. I'm simply ensuring that my death wouldn't be convenient for anyone, including you. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he took the contract, pulled out his own pen, and made the amendments in bold, decisive strokes. His handwriting was surprisingly elegant for someone with his reputation. Anything else? His tone was dangerous now, the patience wearing thin. One more thing. I want access to your financial systems. Complete access. Port operations, shipping manifests, fuel receipts, payroll records, offshore accounts, everything.
No.
Then I can't help you find your mole. You could also be the mole. He leaned forward, and suddenly the space between us felt like it had collapsed entirely. You could be a plant. Someone Fermin or Julian paid to infiltrate my operation. Give you complete access and you could destroy everything from the inside. I could, I agreed. But I won't. Prove it. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out my phone. I'd spent the last 15 minutes before Francesco arrived downloading what I could access from my father's shared business files. I pulled up a spreadsheet, rotated the phone toward him. Your fuel costs for the Mediterranean shipping routes, I said. Last 6 months. You're paying an average of 5.3% more than market rate. Someone's skimming off the top, probably through inflated invoices from a dummy supplier. Francesco took the phone, his eyes scanning the numbers. His expression didn't change, but I saw his grip tighten on the device. How did you? My father has partial access to the joint logistics network. I pulled what I could before we left. I met his gaze. That's a small discrepancy. Easy to miss if you're not looking. But extrapolate that over a year across all your operations, and you're looking at millions in losses. That's not incompetence. That's systematic theft. He handed the phone back slowly. You found this in 15 minutes. I find patterns. It's what I do. Francesco pulled out his own phone, made a call.
Marco.
Pull the fuel contracts for the Mediterranean routes. I want every invoice from the last year, and I want the name of every vendor we've used. He paused. Yes, now. He ended the call, then picked up the pen and signed the contract. His signature was bold, aggressive, each letter a statement of control. Then he slid the document across to me. Sign, he said. And understand this, Miriam Moretti. If you betray me, your father's heart won't be what fails him. I'll ensure his last moments are spent watching what I do to you first. The threat should have terrified me. Maybe it did, somewhere beneath the adrenaline and exhaustion. But I'd lived my entire life invisible, watching more dangerous people play their games while I cleaned up their messes. Francesco Bernardi was brutal, yes, but he was also direct, honest in his way. I signed my name, Miriam Lucia Moretti, closed loop on the M. The limousine slowed as we passed through massive iron gates. The Bernardi estate sprawled before us. A compound that looked more fortress than home, with stone walls and security cameras positioned at every angle. Welcome to your new prison, Francesco said softly. Or your new kingdom. That depends entirely on you. The entrance hall was all marble and menace. Two men waited at the base of the grand staircase. One fair-haired and smiling, the other dark-suited and watching me like I was a specimen to be dissected. Brother! The fair-haired one stepped forward, arms spread wide. Is this her? The infamous Miriam who's caused such a stir. Fermin, Francesco said, his tone flat. Control yourself. Fermin, Francesco's half-brother. I remembered from my father's briefings. Ignored the warning and took my hand, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. Welcome to the family, sister. I promise we're not all as terrifying as Francesco. Up close, Fermin had kind eyes. Too kind for this world, probably. The sort of man who'd be eaten alive by the commission if he didn't have Francesco's protection. Thank you, I said carefully. And this, Francesco gestured to the other man, is Julian Carvello, family counsel. Julian stepped forward, extending his hand for a proper shake. His grip was firm, professional, and his eyes were sharp, calculating every word, every gesture. This was the man Amber had mentioned, the one who'd told her the forgery would work. Mrs. Bernardi, Julian said smoothly, I've heard interesting things about your talents. Have you? I kept my expression neutral, but my mind was racing. He knew. He had to know that Amber had cracked, that his name had been mentioned. But here he stood, composed and professional, as if nothing was wrong. Your father speaks highly of your analytical skills, Julian continued. I'm sure you'll be a tremendous asset to the family. I intend to be, I said. Francesco's hand landed on the small of my back. Possessive, territorial, a clear message to everyone in the room. Miriam will be working with me directly. She'll need access to the financial records, operational databases, and port security footage. Julian's smile never wavered, but something flickered in his eyes. That's quite extensive access for someone so new to the family. She's my wife, Francesco said coldly. Not a guest. Of course. Julian inclined his head. I'll have the credentials prepared by morning. Tonight, Francesco corrected. She starts tonight. Fermin laughed, but there was nervousness in it. Francesco, let the poor woman rest. She's had quite the evening. The poor woman, I said, finding my voice, can speak for herself, and I'd prefer to start immediately. The sooner I can map the discrepancies in your operation, the sooner we can identify who's bleeding your family dry. The silence that followed was absolute. Julian's smile finally faded. Fermin's eyes widened, and Francesco's hand on my back pressed firmer. A warning or an approval? I couldn't tell which. Well then, Julian said quietly, it seems we have a bloodhound in the family. How fortunate. The way he said fortunate made it sound like a death sentence. Francesco leaned close to my ear, his breath warm against my skin. Careful, wife. You've just painted a target on your back. Good, I whispered back. Let them aim. It'll make them easier to find. Francesco's hand dropped from my back as Julian turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing against the marble with the precision of a metronome. Fermin lingered a moment longer, his smile strained, before murmuring something about checking on guest arrangements and disappearing down a side corridor. Then it was just us. Me and the man I'd married in the back of a limousine 20 minutes ago. Your office is this way, Francesco said. I followed him through a maze of hallways, each more opulent than the last. Oil paintings in gilded frames, sculptures that probably cost more than my father's house. But beneath the wealth, I noticed the security. Cameras in every corner, reinforced doors, panic buttons disguised as light switches. We descended a flight of stairs. Then another. The temperature dropped with each level, the marble giving way to older stone, something that predated the modern renovations. Francesco stopped at a heavy steel door with a biometric lock. He pressed his thumb to the scanner, then keyed in an 8-digit code. The lock disengaged with a pneumatic hiss. This was my grandfather's war room, he said, pushing the door open. When the family was still fighting territorial battles, he used this space to plan operations. Now it's just storage for sensitive documents. I stepped inside and understood immediately. It wasn't an office. It was a vault. The room was circular, carved from stone, with no windows and only one exit. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls, each labeled with years and operation codes. In the center sat a desk that looked like it had been salvaged from a bank. Solid oak with brass fixtures, built to withstand anything short of explosives. 2 monitors sat on the surface, already powered on, login screens glowing in the dim light. You'll have access to everything from here, Francesco said, moving to the desk and typing in credentials. Financial records, shipping manifests, personnel files, security footage. The system is isolated, no external network access. Whatever you find stays in this room until you bring it to me. A cage, I said quietly. A sanctuary. He turned to face me. No one comes down here except me. Not Fermin, not Julian, not the security team. The biometric lock is keyed to my thumbprint only. I'll set up secondary access for you before I leave. I moved to the desk, running my fingers along the worn wood. There were scratches in the surface, tallies maybe, or someone keeping track of victories. Or losses. The files are organized chronologically, Francesco continued. Port operations are in the blue cabinets. Financial records in green. Personnel and payroll in red. Security footage is digital, archived by date and location. I pulled out one of the drawers. Manila folders, hundreds of them, each meticulously labeled. Someone had spent years maintaining this system. Someone who understood that information was power. Your grandfather did this? He believed in knowing everything. Francesco's voice was quieter now. He said the moment you stop watching your own organization is the moment someone puts a knife in your back. Smart man. Dead man. Francesco pulled out his phone. Marco is uploading the fuel contracts now. You'll have them within the hour. I suggest you start there. It's the discrepancy you've already identified, and it'll give you a baseline for recognizing the pattern. I nodded, already pulling out files, my mind shifting into the mode I knew best. Numbers, patterns, the truth hidden in ledgers and shipping logs. Francesco moved to the door, then paused. There's a phone on the desk. Internal line only. Press 1 if you need anything. Press 2 if there's an emergency. What constitutes an emergency? His smile was grim. If someone other than me tries to come through that door. Then he was gone. The vault door sealing behind him with a finality that made my chest tighten. I was alone, buried beneath a mafia compound with access to everything that could either save my father or get us both killed. I pulled out my phone, no signal as expected, and set it aside. Then I sat down, cracked my knuckles, and got to work. The pattern emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in chemicals. I started with the fuel contracts, the 5% discrepancy I'd shown Francesco. 3 vendors, all registered to offshore companies with names designed to sound legitimate but generic enough to avoid scrutiny.
Méditerranéen Shipping Solutions.
Adriatic Logistics Group. Tyrrhenian Supply Company. I cross-referenced the vendor registration dates with the payment history. All 3 companies had been created within a 6-month window 2 years ago, right after Francesco's grandfather died. Interesting. I pulled the shipping manifests next. Hundreds of them, logging every container that moved through Bernardi-controlled ports. I created a spreadsheet, mapping the data. Dates, weights, destinations, customs declarations. It took 3 hours just to input the last year's worth of shipments. Then I noticed it. Certain shipments flagged as heavy machinery had weight discrepancies that made no sense. A container logged at 15,000 kilograms would pass through customs at 12,000. Another logged at 20,000 would come in at 16. Either the scales were consistently wrong, or someone was removing cargo mid-transport. I pulled the security footage, scrubbing through hours of grainy dock cameras until I found what I was looking for. A shipment flagged as heavy machinery. The container arrives. It's moved to a secure holding area. Then, in the middle of the night shift, a different truck appears. Unmarked, no company logos. The container is opened. Men in generic work clothes transfer crates to the unmarked truck. The container is resealed. The next morning, it continues to its official destination, thousands of kilograms lighter. I rewound the footage, zoomed in on the access logs displayed in the corner of the security timestamp. The entrance code used to authorize the truck's entry belonged to my father. My stomach dropped. I pulled up the personnel access records, cross-referencing every time my father's credentials had been used to enter the secure areas. Over the past 18 months, his keycard and entry code had been logged at the port 73 times. My father had been on bed rest for 3 weeks. Before that, he'd been in and out of cardiac appointments for 6 months. There was no way he'd been physically present for even half of those entries. Someone had his credentials. Someone who'd been systematically using them to authorize unauthorized access, setting him up to take the fall for whatever operation was bleeding the Bernardi family dry. I pulled the timestamps, started mapping them against the shipment logs, the fuel payments, the discrepancies in weight declarations. The pattern was beautiful in its precision. Elegant, even. Whoever had designed this scheme understood how to hide in plain sight, how to create just enough irregularity to seem like normal operational variance without triggering alarm. But they'd made one mistake. They'd been too consistent. The same time windows for the night shipments. The same 3-day gap between unauthorized access and the next legitimate entry. The same incremental increases in the fuel overcharges. Patterns were my language, and this pattern was screaming a name I didn't want to believe. I was still staring at the screen when I heard the vault door open. I spun in my chair, pulse spiking, but it was Francesco. He stood in the doorway, his jacket gone, sleeves rolled up, looking more human than he had all evening. "It's 4 in the morning," he said. I blinked, looked at the clock in the corner of the monitor. He was right. I'd been down here for 7 hours. "I'm close," I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. "I think I know how they're doing it. I just need to confirm." "You're falling asleep. I'm fine." "You're swaying in your chair." I straightened, but the movement made the room tilt slightly. When had I last eaten? This morning? Yesterday morning? Francesco moved into the room, and I caught the scent of him again. Expensive cologne and something darker, dangerous. He stopped beside the desk, looking at my screens, the spreadsheets full of numbers and highlighted discrepancies. "Show me," he said. I started to explain, pointing to the data, walking him through the fuel contracts and the shipping weights and the pattern of access using my father's credentials. My words came faster as I got into it, the pieces clicking together even as I spoke. And if you look at the timestamp correlation, the unauthorized entries happen exactly 48 hours before each discrepant shipment, which means someone is using the access to prep the containers for the night transfer, and then I stopped. Francesco was staring at me. not at the screens. At me. What? I asked. When did you last sleep? The question caught me off guard. I don't know. Yesterday? Maybe the night before. When did you last eat? Couldn't remember.
Francesco S. Joe tightened.
He pulled out his phone, typed something. Then he looked at me again, and there was something in his expression I couldn't read. Not anger. Something softer, almost. You've been invisible your whole life, he said quietly. Haven't you? The observation hit harder than any threat he'd made. I felt something crack in my chest. A fissure in the armor I'd built over 26 years of being the ghost who kept her family's business running while they took credit or cast blame. It was easier that way, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. Easier for who? I didn't answer. Francesco moved closer, reached out, and I flinched instinctively. But he just tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, the gesture so unexpectedly gentle it made my breath catch. You're not invisible anymore, he said. And you're no good to me burned out. Come on. You need food and sleep. I need to finish. You need to be functional when you present your findings. His hand dropped. Whatever you found, it'll still be there in 6 hours. But you won't be if you keep pushing like this. He was right. I hated that he was right. I saved my work, shut down the monitors. When I stood, my legs felt unsteady, the exhaustion crashing over me like a wave now that I'd stopped moving. Francesco's hand steadied me at the elbow. Easy. I'm fine, I said automatically. You're a terrible liar. But there was something almost like respect in his voice. Come on, wife. Let's get you fed before you collapse on me. As we walked toward the vault door, I realized something. Francesco Bernardi had just seen me at my most vulnerable, exhausted, swaying, barely coherent. And instead of seeing weakness, he'd seen something else. He'd seen someone worth keeping alive. The dress arrived at noon, delivered by a woman who introduced herself simply as Signora Rosa, and proceeded to treat me like a mannequin in need of complete reconstruction. Black silk that moved like water, cut to emphasize curves I didn't know I had, with a neckline that walked the razor's edge between elegant and provocative. Signor Bernardi was very specific, Rosa said, fastening a diamond necklace around my throat. The stones were cold against my skin. He said you must look like you belong to him. I belong to myself, I said quietly. Rosa met my eyes in the mirror, something like sympathy flickering across her face. Tonight, Signorina, you belong to the performance. The commission is watching. They will be looking for weakness, for cracks in the foundation. You must give them none. She was right. I'd spent 6 hours sleeping, another 2 eating and reviewing my findings, and the last hour being transformed into someone I barely recognized. The woman in the mirror looked like she belonged in Francesco's world. Polished, dangerous, composed. I looked like someone who could survive this. The guests will arrive at 7, Rosa continued, pinning my hair into an elegant twist. There will be members of the commission, family associates, business partners. You will smile. You will be gracious. And you will make them believe that you are exactly where you want to be. And if they don't believe it, Rosa's hands stilled. Then you will not see morning, Cara. The dining room was a cathedral of wealth and menace. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across a table that could seat 30. Every surface gleamed polished silver, bone china with gold inlay, wine glasses that probably cost more than my college tuition. Francesco stood at the head of the table, surrounded by men in expensive suits who looked at me the way predators assess potential prey. He'd changed into a 3-piece suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a crime dynasty portrait. All dark elegance and barely restrained power. When he saw me, something shifted in his expression. His gaze traveled from my face to the diamonds at my throat, then back again. He crossed the room in 4 strides, took my hand, and pressed his lips to my knuckles. Bellissima, he murmured, just loud enough for the room to hear. Then quieter, for only me. Remember, you're mine tonight. Act like it. What does that look like? I whispered back. His smile was sharp. Like you're exactly where you want to be. Rosa's words echoed in Francesco's voice. This was a script, and I was expected to know my lines. He led me into the room, his hand possessive at the small of my back. Gentlemen, my wife, Miriam Bernardi. The title felt foreign on my tongue, but I smiled. Let Francesco guide me through introductions. Commission members with names like Castellano and Ricci. Business partners who owned shipping companies and import firms. And standing near the bar, watching me with calculating eyes, was Julian Carvello. Mrs. Bernardi, Julian said smoothly, raising his glass. You look radiant. Marriage clearly agrees with you. Thank you, Julian. Though I suspect you're surprised to see me at all. His smile never wavered. Pleasantly so. I had worried the transition might be difficult for you. I've always been good at transitions. It's one of the advantages of being invisible for so long. You learn to adapt to any environment. Something flickered in Julian's eyes. Message received. I knew about the forgery. I knew about his involvement. And I wasn't going to be the silent, manageable wife he'd expected. Fermin appeared at my elbow, pressing a glass of champagne into my hand. Don't let Julian intimidate you, sister. He's all calculation and no heart. I'm a forensic accountant, I said. Calculation is my language. Fermin laughed, but there was nervousness in it. Francesco, you've married a woman as dangerous as you are. I'm not sure whether to be impressed or terrified. Be both, Francesco said. I am. The doors opened. Late arrivals filtered in, and my stomach dropped when I saw who was among them. Amber, wearing a red dress that screamed for attention. Her hair in perfect waves. Makeup applied with the precision of someone who'd spent hours preparing for battle. And on her arm, looking entirely too pleased with himself, was Julian. She saw me and stopped. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the stepsister who'd tormented me for years, the girl who'd accidentally spilled wine on my homework, who'd told her mother I was stealing from the household account when I was actually catching embezzlement, who'd made sure I stayed invisible because she couldn't stand the competition. Then her mask slipped into place. Pity mixed with contempt. Miriam, she said, her voice carrying across the room. Oh my God, Miriam. I'm so glad you're okay. The conversation around us quieted. This was theater and everyone knew it. Amber, I said evenly. What a surprise. I know, right? After everything that happened, I just had to make sure you were being treated well. She glanced at Francesco, then back at me. I mean, I know you're used to being in the background, used to people not noticing you, but this must be such a big adjustment. Being seen. Having expectations placed on you. The insult was wrapped in concern, designed to humiliate me in front of the commission, to paint me as the invisible ghost daughter who'd been thrust into a role she couldn't possibly fill. I felt Francesco tense beside me. Actually, I said, keeping my voice light, conversational, the adjustment has been remarkably smooth. Turns out, when you've spent years running the operations no one else wanted to acknowledge, stepping into an official role is quite natural. Amber's smile tightened. Running operations? Miriam, you filed paperwork. You weren't exactly. She's being modest, Francesco interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. My wife doesn't just file paperwork. She sees patterns others miss. She finds problems others create. In the 36 hours since she entered this family, she's already identified discrepancies in our supply chain that have been bleeding us for 2 years. The room went silent. Commission members exchanged glances. Julian's expression remained neutral, but I saw his hand tighten on his glass. 2 years. Fermin asked, his tone carefully casual. That's quite specific. It is, I said, meeting his gaze. The irregularities started approximately 6 months after the passing of your grandfather. Small at first, fractional percentage increases in fuel costs, minor weight discrepancies in shipment manifests. But compounded over time, we're looking at roughly 3 million in losses. I watched Fermin's face carefully, watched Julian's. They shared a look, brief, almost imperceptible. But I'd spent my life reading micro-expressions, and that look said everything. She knows. 3 million, Julian repeated slowly. That's a significant accusation, Mrs. Bernardi. I assume you have evidence to support such a claim. I have spreadsheets, shipping logs, security footage, and vendor registration documents. I smiled. I'm a forensic accountant, Julian. Evidence is what I do. Francesco's hand found mine under the table, squeezed once. Warning or approval, I couldn't tell. Amber laughed, the sound brittle. God, Miriam, you're still doing that thing where you make everything about numbers and patterns. Some things can't be reduced to data, like loyalty, like trust. You're absolutely right, I said. Trust can't be quantified, which is why it's so much more valuable than money. I looked at Francesco, let something real slip into my voice, and why it's so devastating when it's betrayed. Francesco's gaze held mine, and in that moment, the performance became something else. Something more dangerous than either of us had intended. My wife, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, is the consigliere of my heart. She sees what I cannot. She finds what I've missed. And she will help me build something my grandfather only dreamed of. An empire that cannot be undermined from within. The declaration was bold. Reckless, even. Commission members were already whispering. Fermin had gone pale, and Julian's mask had finally slipped, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. How romantic, Amber said, but her voice shook. I'm sure you'll both be very happy, for however long that lasts. The threat was thinly veiled. Francesco moved before I could react, stepping into Amber's space with the kind of controlled violence that made grown men flinch. Careful, he said softly. You're in my house, eating my food, wearing jewelry my associate bought you. Everything you have exists because I allow it. Remember that before you make threats against my wife. Julian placed a hand on Amber's arm, steering her away.
Apologies, Francesco.
She's had too much champagne. We'll take our leave. Yes, Francesco said. You will. They left. The room slowly resumed its conversations, but the tension remained, thick, oppressive, a storm building on the horizon. Fermin approached, his smile strained. That was quite the performance, brother. Very convincing. It wasn't a performance, Francesco said coldly. Fermin's eyes flicked to me, then back to Francesco. No, he said quietly. I don't think it was, which makes this infinitely more complicated. He walked away, leaving me standing beside Francesco, both of us aware that we just painted an even bigger target on our backs. 3 million, Francesco murmured, his lips barely moving. You found the exact number? Give or take a few thousand, I whispered back. And Francesco? I know who's taking it. His hand tightened on mine. Tell me. Not here. Too many ears. I smiled for the benefit of our audience. But we need to move quickly. Now that they know I'm close, they'll try to erase the evidence. Or erase me. Then we move tonight, he said. The moment these vultures leave, you show me everything. And then we decide who dies first. The casual way he said it should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Relief. Because Francesco Bernardi wasn't just my husband in a blood oath contract. He was my partner in the most dangerous investigation of my life. And God help anyone who tried to stop us. The last guest left at midnight. Francesco stood at the door, playing the gracious host until the final car disappeared through the gates. Then his mask dropped, and he turned to me with the kind of focused intensity that made the air feel thinner. Show me, he said. We descended to the vault in silence. The security of the stone walls and the locked door felt less like protection now and more like a countdown. Someone knew I was close, which meant someone was already moving to cover their tracks. I pulled up the files I'd compiled, the web of transactions and shell companies I'd been mapping for the past 12 hours. Francesco stood behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, smell the faint remnants of his cologne mixed with the tension radiating off his body. The fuel contracts were just the surface, I said, pulling up the vendor records. 3 shell companies, all created within 6 months of your grandfather's death. But when I traced the payment routing, they all funnel to the same place. I clicked through the banking records, following the money as it bounced from account to account. Italy to Switzerland, Switzerland to Luxembourg, Luxembourg to the Cayman Islands. Offshore, Francesco said quietly. Offshore, I confirmed. Account number 847, CC 2891. Opened 23 months ago. Cayman International Trust Bank. I pulled up the registration documents I'd managed to access through a combination of my father's old banking contacts and some creative interpretation of access permissions. The account holder is listed as Elena Rossi. Francesco went very still. That's impossible. Why? Because Elena Rossi is my stepmother's maiden name. His voice was carefully controlled, but I heard the edge beneath it. Fermin's mother. I turned to look at him. She's still alive? She died 6 years ago. Breast cancer.
Francesco S. Jotaitend.
My father never remarried. He barely spoke her name after she passed. It destroyed something in him. Someone's using her identity, I said, turning back to the screen. And not just for this account. When I cross-referenced the name against property records and business registrations, I found 12 other entities, holding companies, limited partnerships, real estate trusts, all created in the last 2 years, all using variations of Elena Rossi's information. I pulled up the property records. Look at this. 3 warehouses in Naples sold to one of these shell companies 18 months ago. Below market value, transferred from Bernardi Holdings. A shipping facility in Genoa sold 14 months ago. A logistics hub in Palermo sold 8 months ago. Francesco leaned in, his hand bracing on the desk beside mine. Those are core infrastructure. We use those facilities for legitimate operations. You used them, I corrected. According to the transfer documents, they're no longer Bernardi assets. They've been liquidated, one by one, and the proceeds are sitting in offshore accounts under your stepmother's name. Fermin, Francesco said, the name like gravel in his throat. Maybe, but look at this. I pulled up another set of documents. The legal paperwork for all these transfers was prepared by the same law firm, Carvello and Associates. Julian, I confirmed. He drafted the sale agreements, managed the title transfers, set up the offshore accounts. Every single transaction has his signature on it. Francesco was quiet for a long moment, processing. I could see the gears turning, the cold calculation replacing the initial shock. A liquidation strategy, he said finally. They're not trying to take over the family. They're dismantling it, selling it off piece by piece, and making millions in the process, I added. But there's something else, something that doesn't fit. I pulled up the timeline I'd created, mapping each sale against other family events, business deals, territorial disputes, commission votes. Every time one of these assets was sold, it created a gap in your operational capacity. The Naples warehouses were sold right before a major expansion into the Adriatic routes. Without that storage capacity, you had to rent space from competitors at inflated rates. The Genoa facility was sold just before a commission vote on shipping territorial rights. You lost that vote because you couldn't prove you had the infrastructure to service the region. Francesco's eyes narrowed. They weren't just stealing money. They were sabotaging my position within the commission. Systematically, I said, and using your father's compromised credentials to make it look like he authorized everything. When the commission discovers the extent of the losses, they won't just demand restitution. They'll question your ability to lead. They'll push for a vote to transfer control, to Fermin, or to liquidate the family entirely and redistribute the territories. I met his gaze. Francesco, this isn't theft. It's a coup. And the endgame isn't power. It's elimination. His hand found mine on the desk, gripped it hard enough to hurt. How much time do we have? Not enough. The moment I mentioned 3 million at dinner, Julian knew I was too close. He'll move to erase the evidence. Digital records can be deleted. Paper trails can be burned. I squeezed his hand back. We need physical proof. Something they can't destroy remotely. The server room, Francesco said. All the transaction records are backed up on the physical servers. If we can pull the drives before they're wiped. Where is it? Sub-basement, East Wing. He checked his watch. Security does a rotation change at 2 a.m. That gives us a 15-minute window when coverage is thinnest. I stood. Then we go now. Miriam. Don't. I cut him off. Don't tell me it's too dangerous. Don't tell me to stay here where it's safe. I'm the only one who knows what to look for, which records are critical, which files will hold up under scrutiny. You need me. Francesco studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Stay close. If anything happens, you run. No heroics, no trying to save me. You get out and you contact Marco. Understood. Understood. I lied. We took the stairs, avoiding the main corridors. Francesco moved like smoke, silent, efficient, his hand occasionally touching my back to guide me or pulling me into shadows when he heard footsteps. I'd never felt so alive, my pulse hammering with adrenaline and terror in equal measure. The server room was behind another biometric lock. Francesco scanned his thumb, entered the code. The door clicked open. Inside, rows of blade servers hummed in climate-controlled precision. Backup drives stacked on steel shelves. This was the heart of the Bernardi operation. Every transaction, every communication, every piece of evidence that could either save Francesco or destroy him. I went straight to the backup array, pulling drives according to the date ranges I needed. Francesco kept watch at the door, his body tense, one hand inside his jacket where I knew he kept a gun. Miriam, he said quietly. Company. Footsteps. Close. Too close. I grabbed the last drive, shoved it in my jacket pocket. Francesco pulled me away from the servers, positioned us behind a rack of equipment. The door opened. Julian Carvello stepped inside, his suit jacket gone, sleeves rolled up, looking far less composed than he had at dinner. He went straight to the main server console, pulled out his phone, and started typing commands. I felt Francesco tense beside me, his hand moving toward his weapon. I grabbed his wrist, held it. Not yet, I mouthed. Let him incriminate himself. Julian's fingers flew across the keyboard. On the monitor, I could see file directories being accessed. Financial records, transaction histories, and then, with cold precision, deletion commands. He was erasing everything. I pulled out my phone, no signal, but the camera still worked. I started recording, capturing Julian's face, the commands on the screen, the systematic destruction of evidence. Julian paused, his head tilting as if he'd heard something. He turned slowly, scanning the room. Francesco's hand tightened on his gun. Julian's gaze swept past our hiding spot once, twice. Then his phone buzzed. He answered it, his voice low. It's done. Yes, all of it. The girl, she's smarter than we thought, but it doesn't matter. Without the digital trail, all she has is theory. No. Francesco won't move against his own brother without proof. He paused. Tomorrow, we liquidate the port holdings and disappear before the commission realizes what's happened. He ended the call, took one last look around, and left. I waited 30 seconds, then stood. My legs felt unsteady, the adrenaline making my hands shake. I got it, I said, holding up my phone. All of it. Francesco pulled me close, his forehead touching mine briefly. You brilliant, reckless woman. We need to move these drives somewhere safe, I said. And we need to. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. And then I heard it. Footsteps, multiple sets, coming from both directions. They knew, Francesco said, his voice deadly calm. He pulled his gun, handed me a second one from an ankle holster. Change of plans. We fight our way out.
Francesco.
Stay behind me. Aim for center mass if anyone comes through that door who isn't Marco. His eyes met mine in the crimson darkness. And Miriam? Thank you for being worth choosing. Then the door exploded inward, and everything went to hell. The door exploded inward, but it wasn't Julian's men on the other side. It was Marco, Francesco's second-in-command, with 3 security personnel behind him. All armed. All loyal. Capo, Marco said, breathing hard. Julian triggered the vault protocols. He's trying to seal you in. We need to move now. Francesco grabbed my hand, and we ran. Through corridors I didn't recognize, up stairs that seemed to spiral endlessly. Behind us, I could hear shouting, the heavy footfalls of pursuit. Francesco fired twice behind us without looking, the shots echoing like thunder in the confined space. We burst into what looked like a library, floor-to-ceiling books, leather furniture, a massive fireplace. Marco slammed the door behind us, through the bolt. This won't hold long, he said. Francesco moved to the fireplace, pressed something on the mantel. A section of bookshelf swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. Emergency escape route, he said, pulling me toward it. Goes to the garage. Marco, buy us 5 minutes. Marco nodded once, checked his weapon. 5 minutes. Then I'm out too. Good luck, Capo. We plunged into darkness. Francesco had a flashlight from somewhere, the beam cutting through the dust and cobwebs. The passage was barely wide enough for one person, the walls pressing in from both sides. I could hear my own breathing, harsh and rapid, mixing with Francesco's. How did they know? I asked. Security cameras. Julian must have access to the feeds. Francesco's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. I trusted him. I trusted both of them. We emerged in an underground garage. 3 cars sat in the bay, including a black Mercedes with diplomatic plates. Francesco pulled keys from a hidden panel on the wall, threw them to me. You drive. I'll navigate and watch our 6. I didn't argue. We peeled out of the garage as the door behind us began to buckle, shouts echoing in our wake. The safe house was 40 minutes outside the city, hidden in the hills. A stone cottage that looked abandoned until Francesco opened the door and I saw the interior was fully equipped. Weapons cache, communications equipment, supplies for a siege. My grandfather's contingency plan, Francesco said, bolting the door behind us. He always said to have a place where you could disappear if your own family turned on you. I set the server drives on the table, my hands finally starting to shake now that we'd stopped moving. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me hollow and cold. Francesco poured 2 glasses of whiskey, pressed one into my hands. Drink. I did. The burn helped, anchored me back in my body. We have maybe 6 hours before they find this place, Francesco said. Julian knows about most of my safe houses. He helped me secure them. The bitterness in his voice was corrosive. What do you need? A laptop, internet connection, and time to prove what I already know. He set up a laptop on the table, connected it to a satellite uplink. I plugged in the server drives, started pulling files. My mind shifted back into the pattern recognition mode that had always been my sanctuary, the place where emotions couldn't touch me and everything made sense. But this time, I wasn't looking at shipping manifests or fuel costs. I was looking at the original document that had started everything, the forged marriage addendum. I pulled up the scan I'd made that first night, zoomed in on the letterhead. I'd been so focused on the signature, on the timing, that I hadn't paid attention to the paper itself. But now, with everything I knew about Julian's involvement, I looked closer. The watermark, the font, the spacing of the company logo. I cross-referenced it with legitimate Moretti logistics documents. Different paper weight, different watermark entirely. Then I pulled up samples of legal documents from Carvello and Associates, contracts Julian had drafted for other Bernardi business dealings. Perfect match. Francesco, I said quietly. The forgery. The marriage addendum that started all of this. It wasn't drafted on Moretti Logistics letterhead. He moved behind me, looking over my shoulder. Then whose? Julian's law firm. Look at the watermark. The font metrics. This document was created on Carvello and Associates Stationery, then modified to look like it came from my father's company. I pulled up more files, my fingers flying across the keyboard. And look at this. The offshore accounts under your stepmother's name? The registration documents all have the same digital signature metadata. They were all created on the same computer, at the same IP address. I pulled up the location data. Julian's office. His personal workstation. Francesco was very quiet behind me. I could feel the rage building in him, cold and controlled. He planned everything? I continued, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. The forgery was deliberate. He wanted me in this house, not Amber. Amber would have been useless, decorative, manageable, no threat. But me. I turned to look at him. He knew I'd find the discrepancies. He knew I'd start investigating. Why would he want that? Because he needed someone to blame. I pulled up another file, internal communications between Julian and the commission, dated over the past 18 months. Look at these emails. Julian's been laying groundwork, suggesting to commission members that your family is unstable, that the leadership is compromised. He's been planting the idea that the Bernardi empire is collapsing from within. Francesco read over my shoulder, his jaw tightening with each message. He needed a smoking gun, I said. Proof that your father's legacy was built on fraud and that you couldn't control your own organization. So he orchestrated the forgery, brought me into the family knowing I'd uncover the embezzlement, and planned to use my findings to trigger a commission investigation. That would give them grounds to dissolve the family, Francesco said. Redistribute our territories to Julian's other clients. He represents half the families in the commission. I pulled up Julian's client list. Every territory the Bernardi family controls, Julian has a buyer ready. He wasn't just stealing from you, Francesco. He was brokering your empire piece by piece. And for Min, I pulled up the offshore accounts again, started tracing the money more carefully. Fermin's name is on the accounts, but look at the withdrawal patterns. Small, regular amounts, just enough to make it look like he's living off the proceeds. But the bulk of the money is not moving. It's sitting in these accounts, untouched. A frame job, Francesco said quietly. A perfect one. When the commission investigates, they'll find millions in offshore accounts under your brother's mother's maiden name. They'll assume Fermin is the thief. He'll be executed for betraying the family. You'll be disgraced for failing to catch him. And Julian walks away clean with his commission on selling your empire. Francesco moved to the window, stared out at the darkness. My grandfather always said the most dangerous enemy is the one who smiles while sharpening the knife.
Francesco.
I've been losing control for 2 years, he said, his voice raw. Ever since my grandfather died. My father couldn't hold it together after Elena passed. He left me to run everything, and I was 28 years old, trying to fill shoes I wasn't ready for. He turned to face me. I became brutal because I had to be. Every sign of weakness, every moment of doubt, and the vultures would circle. So I made them afraid of me instead. I stood, moved closer to him. It wasn't enough.
No.
His smile was bitter. Because while I was playing the monster to keep the wolves at bay, the snake was already inside the house. Julian's been with this family since I was 15. He was my father's closest advisor. He's Fermin's godfather, and he's been dismantling everything my grandfather built, and I didn't see it. You see it now. Francesco's eyes met mine, and I saw something in them I hadn't before. Vulnerability, fear. Not of Julian or the commission, but of what he'd become in trying to protect what mattered. I don't trust easily, he said. I can't afford to. Every person close to me is a potential knife in the dark. I know. But you... He moved closer, his hand coming up to cup my face. You've had every reason to betray me. Every opportunity. You could have walked away, let me burn, protected your father and disappeared. But you didn't. We made a deal, I said. This stopped being about the deal the moment you fell asleep at that desk. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. You don't carry other people's weight for money, Miriam. You carry it because you don't know how to stop. Because you've been invisible so long, you think the only way to matter is to be useful. The observation cut deeper than any threat he'd ever made. I felt something crack in my chest, the armor I'd built over 26 years fracturing under the weight of being truly seen. I need you to know something, Francesco continued, his voice dropping to something raw and honest. If we survive this, if we take down Julian and Fermin and somehow keep the commission from tearing us apart, you're not my forensic accountant. You're not my useful wife. You're my equal, my partner, the only person I trust with the truth of what this family has become.
Francesco.
Let me finish. His forehead touched mine, and I could feel him trembling. I'm asking you to choose. Not because of a contract or a blood oath or because your father needs protection. Choose to stay with me because you want to, because you believe we can build something better than what my grandfather left behind. I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. What if I don't know what I want? What if I've been invisible so long? I don't know how to be anything else. Then we figure it out together, he said. But Miriam, I need to know. Are you with me? Truly with me? Because what we're about to do, confronting Julian, exposing Fermin, going to war with my own family, I can't do it alone. And I won't do it with someone who's only here out of obligation. I thought about my father, safe in a hospital bed with the best cardiac care money could buy. I thought about Amber, who'd thrown me to the wolves to save herself. I thought about 26 years of being the ghost who fixed everyone's disasters while they took credit or cast blame. And I thought about Francesco, who'd seen past the invisibility to the person underneath, who'd called me his consigliere, his equal, his partner. I'm with you, I said, not because of the contract, because you're the first person who's ever seen me as something other than useful. Francesco kissed me then, hard, desperate, a seal on a promise neither of us was sure we could keep. When he pulled back, his eyes were clearer, more focused. Then we end this, he said. Tomorrow we take everything you found to the commission. We burn Julian and Fermin to the ground. And we make sure everyone knows you're not the victim in this story. What am I? His smile was sharp, dangerous, and full of something that looked almost like pride. You're the architect of their destruction, the ghost who became a god. I smiled back, feeling something fierce and powerful uncoiling in my chest. Then let's give them hell. We spent 3 hours at the safe house, piecing together the final elements of Julian's scheme. The laptop screen cast a pale glow across Francesco's face as I walked him through the evidence. Each document another nail in Julian's coffin. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Final shipment. Pier 7. Midnight. Come alone or your father dies.
J.
Francesco read over my shoulder. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap. I checked the time. 10:47 p.m. But it's also our only chance to catch them in the act. Whatever they're moving tonight, it's the endgame. After this, the evidence disappears and we're left with nothing but theories. Your father is in a hospital surrounded by Marco's men. Julian's bluffing. He needs leverage, and he's desperate enough to try anything. I met Francesco's gaze. But that shipment? That's real. I've been tracking the logistics. A container flagged as heavy machinery, scheduled for midnight departure to the Cayman Islands. 20,000 kilograms declared weight. Francesco pulled up the port manifests on the laptop. Pier 7 is Bernardi-controlled territory. My security team monitors it. Your compromised security team, I corrected. Julian's had 2 years to plant people in your organization. We go in alone or we don't go at all. He was quiet for a long moment, weighing the options. Then he stood, moved to the weapons cache, and started loading magazines with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. If we're doing this, we do it smart, he said, tossing me a Kevlar vest. Wear this under your jacket. Take this. He handed me a compact pistol, the same model he'd given me in the server room. You remember how to use it? Point, squeeze, pray I don't have to. His smile was grim. Good enough. He strapped on his own vest, holstered 2 weapons, and grabbed a tactical bag. We'll approach from the south access road. There's a blind spot in the camera coverage. Something Julian doesn't know about, because it was my grandfather's secret entrance. How do you know Julian doesn't know? Because if he did, he would have used it to move his unauthorized shipments instead of risking my father's credentials.
Francesco S. Jotaitend.
My grandfather trusted no one, not even family. He built redundancies into everything. We took the Mercedes, driving with the lights off once we got within a mile of the port. The docks loomed ahead, massive cranes silhouetted against the night sky, shipping containers stacked like a steel city. Francesco parked behind an abandoned warehouse, and we approached on foot. The air smelled like salt and diesel and something metallic that might have been blood or might have been rust. In the distance, I could hear the clang of metal on metal, the low rumble of truck engines. Francesco moved like a shadow, his hand occasionally touching my back to guide me or pulling me behind cover when he spotted movement. We navigated between containers, using the maze of steel to stay hidden. Pier 7 came into view. A single shipping container sat under the harsh glare of floodlights, surrounded by 4 men I didn't recognize. Not Bernardi security. Private contractors, probably. Mercenaries. And standing beside the container, checking his watch with theatrical impatience, was Julian Carvello. Francesco's hand found mine in the darkness, squeezed once. I understood. Stay hidden. Watch. Don't engage until I move. A truck approached, unmarked and windowless. The driver climbed out, and my stomach dropped when I saw who it was. Fermin. Francesco went rigid beside me. I felt the moment his heart broke, watching his brother, the gentle one, the one who'd always seemed too kind for this world, shake hands with Julian like they were partners in a legitimate business deal. Right on time, Julian said, his voice carrying in the still air. Is everything arranged on your end? Fermin nodded. The wire transfer is queued. The moment the container leaves Italian waters, the funds move from the Cayman accounts to the Swiss trust. 30 million, just like we agreed. And Francesco? Has no idea. Fermin's voice was steady, businesslike. By the time he realizes what's happening, we'll be gone. The commission will find the offshore accounts. They'll trace everything back to the forged documents, and Francesco will spend the rest of his very short life trying to explain how his own brother systematically dismantled the family empire. Julian smiled. Perfect. And the girl? What about her? She knows too much. She's seen the pattern, traced the accounts. We can't leave her alive. Fermin hesitated. She's Francesco's wife. Killing her will be seen as Francesco tying up loose ends before his inevitable arrest by the commission. Julian pulled out his phone. I've already drafted the narrative. Tragic story, really. Young wife discovers her husband's criminal enterprise, threatens to expose him, ends up at the bottom of the harbor. The commission eats it up. Francesco's credibility is destroyed, and we walk away clean. I felt Francesco tense beside me, his hand moving toward his weapon. I grabbed his wrist, held tight. Not yet. Let them finish. We need the full confession. Where is she now? Fermin asked. Safe house in the hills. I've got men on the way. She'll be dead within the hour. Julian checked his watch again. We should move. The ship captain is waiting, and I don't want any complications. He moved toward the container, pulled out a key, and unlocked the massive doors. They swung open with a groan of metal. The container was empty. Not just empty. Completely empty. No crates, no machinery, nothing but bare steel walls. What the hell? Fermin moved closer, staring into the void. Where's the shipment? There is no shipment, Julian said calmly. There never was. This container is just for show, for the manifest logs. The real assets moved 3 days ago. Digital transfers, liquidation of the remaining properties, conversion to bearer bonds. Everything we needed is already offshore. Then why are we here? Because Francesco needed one final piece of evidence to justify his paranoia. Julian's smile was cold. And because you, dear Fermin, are about to become the fall guy. The world shifted into slow motion. I saw Fermin's face change, confusion giving way to understanding and then to terror. I saw Julian pull a gun from his jacket. I saw Francesco explode from our hiding spot, weapon raised. Julian. 3 things happened at once. Julian spun, fired at Francesco. The shot went wide, sparking off a container to our left. Fermin lunged at Julian, grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" And I ran forward, my own weapon raised, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Nobody moves." Julian, drop the gun. The mercenaries raised their weapons. For guns pointed at us, for strangers willing to kill for money. Julian laughed. Actually laughed, like this was the punchline to a joke only he understood. "The ghost accountant," he said. "You're supposed to be dead. I had 3 men at that safe house. Marco got to them first," Francesco said. His gun trained on Julian's head. "You're not the only one who can plan ahead. It doesn't matter." Julian's composure was cracking now, the smooth lawyer facade giving way to something desperate and ugly. "You think this ends with me? I've been documenting everything, Francesco. Every illegal shipment, every off-book transaction, every body your family has buried. If I go down, I'm taking the entire Bernardi empire with me. I'll give the commission enough evidence to dismantle your organization and arrest every associate from here to Sicily." "You're bluffing," I said. "Am I?" Julian's smile widened. "There's a dead man's switch. If I don't check in every 12 hours, everything I've compiled goes straight to the commission president and the federal prosecutor. You kill me, you destroy yourselves." Francesco didn't lower his weapon. "Then I guess we're all going down together." "Francesco, wait." Fermin's voice was pleading. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know he was planning to kill you. He told me we were just relocating assets, protecting the family from commission oversight." "Shut up," Julian snarled. "You pathetic fool. You actually believed I was helping you secure your inheritance? I've been using you from the beginning. Your mother's identity, your access to family records, your signature on documents you were too stupid to read carefully. You're not my partner, Fermin. You're my scapegoat." Fermin staggered back like he'd been struck.
No.
"No, you said. I said what you wanted to hear." Julian's gun swung toward Fermin. "And now you're a liability." I fired. The shot caught Julian in the shoulder, spinning him around. His gun clattered to the ground. The mercenaries raised their weapons, but Francesco was already moving, taking down the closest one with 2 shots. Center mass, professional, efficient. Chaos erupted. Gunfire echoed across the dock. I dove behind a crate, returning fire with shaking hands. Francesco moved like he'd been born to this, fluid, deadly, each shot precise. Sirens wailed in the distance. Flashing lights approached from multiple directions. "Marco," Francesco called out. "You beautiful bastard." The cavalry had arrived. Marco and 20 Bernardi security personnel swarmed the dock, overwhelming the remaining mercenaries. Within minutes, it was over. Julian lay on the ground, clutching his shoulder, his perfect suit soaked with blood. Fermin sat nearby, head in his hands, looking like his world had just shattered. Because it had. Francesco moved to where I crouched behind the crate, pulled me to my feet, checked me over with frantic hands. "You're okay? You're not hit." "I'm fine." "Francesco, the dead man's switch doesn't exist," Marco said, walking up with Julian's phone. "Found it on him. He was bluffing. The man's a lawyer, not a criminal mastermind. He didn't have a backup plan because he never thought he'd need one." I looked at Julian, bleeding and broken on the concrete. "All of this, for what? Money? For power," Julian said through gritted teeth. "For the satisfaction of watching you all destroy each other while I orchestrated every move. I built this family's legal infrastructure. I protected your grandfather, your father, you. And what did I get? A salary, respect, but never the real power, never the seat at the table. So you decided to burn the table down, Francesco said quietly. I decided to take what I was owed. Francesco looked at his brother, sitting in the shadow of the shipping container, and something in his expression softened. Fermin. I didn't know, Fermin whispered.
I suer, Francesco.
He showed me documents, told me the family was bleeding money because of your expansion plans. He said we needed to protect our assets offshore until things stabilized. I thought I was helping. You thought you were inheriting, Francesco said. Yes. Fermin's voice broke. I thought you'd run us into the ground, and I was trying to save something for when it all collapsed. But I never wanted you dead. I never wanted any of this. Francesco was quiet for a long moment. Then he holstered his weapon and held out his hand. Fermin took it, let Francesco pull him to his feet. You're an idiot, Francesco said. A naive, trusting idiot. But you're still my brother. What happens now? Francesco looked at Marco. Take Julian to the secure facility. I want a full confession. Every account, every transaction, every person he's compromised. And then we call the commission. And Fermin? Marco asked. Francesco looked at his brother, saw the boy who'd always been too gentle for this world. House arrest. 24-hour supervision. And Fermin? He gripped his brother's shoulder. You work with Miriam to help clean up this mess. You undo every fraudulent transaction, you return every stolen asset, and you prove that you can be trusted. Or I hand you to the commission myself. Fermin nodded, tears streaming down his face. I moved to Francesco's side, and together we watched as Marco's team secured the scene. The empty container stood as a monument to Julian's arrogance, the perfect crime that had relied on everyone being exactly as stupid and trusting as he'd calculated. But he'd made one fatal mistake. He'd underestimated the ghost. The commission arrived at dawn. 6 black SUVs rolling through the port gates with the inevitability of a death sentence. Francesco and I stood at the center of Pier 7, surrounded by Marco's men, Julian bleeding in zip-tie restraints, and Fermin looking like a ghost of himself. I'd known they were coming. Marco had sent the call 4 hours ago. Formal summons, emergency tribunal, all senior commission members required to attend. When the head of a major family faced accusations of betrayal, the commission came to witness judgment firsthand. The SUVs formed a semicircle around us. Doors opened. 12 men emerged. The most powerful crime lords in Italy, each one responsible for territories that stretched across continents. I recognized some from the dinner. Castellano, with his silver hair and predator's eyes. Ricci, younger but equally dangerous. And at the center, the commission president himself, Salvatore Dante, a man whose reputation for cold-blooded pragmatism was legendary. Francesco Bernardi, Dante said, his voice carrying across the dock with the weight of authority. You've called an emergency tribunal. Present your case. But before Francesco could speak, another vehicle pulled up, a sleek town car that screamed legal authority. The door opened, and 2 men in expensive suits emerged, carrying briefcases that probably cost more than most people's cars. Behind them, supported by a private security detail, came Julian. Not bleeding and restrained. Cleaned up, bandaged, wearing a fresh suit, looking every inch the distinguished family counsel. What the hell? Marco moved forward, hand on his weapon. He was in custody. On whose authority? One of the lawyers stepped forward, presenting documentation. My client was detained without warrant, without charges, and without legal representation. He invoked his rights under commission law, and as per Article 7, Section 3, he has been released pending formal adjudication. Dante's eyes narrowed. Carvello, you're supposed to be under arrest. I'm supposed to be defending my client, Julian said smoothly, his composure completely restored, and exposing a conspiracy that threatens the entire commission structure. He gestured to his security detail. They moved forward carrying boxes, dozens of them, filled with documents, hard drives, folders stamped with official seals. Gentlemen of the commission, Julian announced, his voice taking on the practiced cadence of a courtroom professional. What you're witnessing here is not justice. It's a desperate attempt by Francesco Bernardi to cover up 2 years of systematic embezzlement, fraud, and betrayal of commission trust.
Francesco S. Jotaitend.
That's a lie. Is it? Julian's lawyer stepped forward, pulling documents from one of the boxes. These are financial records showing offshore accounts under false names, liquidation of family assets without commission approval, unauthorized territory negotiations with foreign organizations, all signed off by Francesco Bernardi. Forged documents, I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs that had started among the commission members. Fabricated by Julian himself to frame. And who are you? Julian's lawyer turned to me, his expression dismissive. The wife who's been married, what, for days? Hardly a credible witness to years of financial irregularities. I'm the forensic accountant who traced every fraudulent transaction back to your client's law firm. I shot back. And I have evidence. Conveniently compiled after being brought into the family under suspicious circumstances. Julian stepped forward, playing to the commission now. Gentlemen, let's be clear about what happened here. Francesco's father's shipping business was compromised. A breach occurred. Rather than accept responsibility, Francesco manufactured a crisis. He forced this woman, he gestured to me with theatrical contempt, into a marriage contract to give her access to family records, then had her fabricate evidence pointing to anyone but himself. That's insane, Francesco said. Is it? Or is it the perfect frame job? Julian pulled out another document, the original marriage addendum, the forgery that had started everything. This contract was discovered to be fraudulent. Francesco knew it. Instead of exposing the truth, he used it as leverage to bring in his own investigator disguised as a bride. A woman with forensic accounting skills who could manufacture whatever evidence he needed. The commission members exchanged glances. I could see the doubt creeping in, the suspicion. Julian had always been their lawyer too, had represented most of these families at some point. He was a known quantity. Francesco and I were chaos. Furthermore, Julian continued, I have testimony from Fermin Bernardi, Francesco's own brother, detailing years of reckless expansion, unauthorized deals, and systematic looting of family assets to fund Francesco's personal ambitions. Fermin stepped forward, looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. It's true, he said quietly. I've been documenting everything. The offshore accounts, the liquidated properties, it's all Francesco. I tried to stop him, tried to protect what our grandfather built. But, you're lying, I said. Fermin, you told us yourself that Julian manipulated you. Under duress, Julian's lawyer interjected. After being held at gunpoint by Francesco and his men. Any confession made under those circumstances is inadmissible. Dante raised his hand, silencing everyone. Enough. This is a circus. He looked at Francesco. You called this tribunal. You claimed you had evidence of betrayal. Present it now, or I'm ruling in favor of asset seizure and a formal investigation into your entire operation. This was it. The moment where everything either worked or we lost everything. Francesco looked at me. I saw the trust there, the faith that I could do what he couldn't, prove the truth with numbers and patterns that couldn't be argued away. I pulled out the tablet I'd been holding, the one connected to the laptop back at the safe house via secure satellite link. Marco had spent the last 4 hours uploading everything while Julian was being processed by his legal team. Projection, I said to Marco. He moved to one of the SUVs, pulled out portable projection equipment, the kind used for tactical briefings. Within minutes, we had a screen set up against the side of a massive shipping container, bright enough to see in the dawn light. I connected the tablet. The commission seal appeared on the makeshift screen, then dissolved into a spreadsheet. Gentlemen, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. What you're looking at is a complete transaction history of the Bernardi family's financial activities over the past 24 months. Every offshore account, every liquidated asset, every fraudulent transfer. Julian's expression flickered. This proves nothing. It's exactly the evidence I've been. I'm not finished. I advanced to the next screen. These are the digital signatures embedded in every document. Legal files have metadata, information about when they were created, on what computer, by which user account. Every single fraudulent document was created on the same workstation. I pulled up the registration data. Computer ID, JC Law Station 01. Registered to Julian Carvello's office at Carvello and Associates. Murmurs rippled through the commission. Julian's lawyer stepped forward. That's circumstantial. My client has staff, associates who use. I'm not finished. I advanced again. Here are the login credentials for every transaction. Time-stamped, biometrically verified. Julian Carvello's personal access codes, his fingerprint authentication, his retinal scan data. He didn't delegate this. He did it himself. The murmurs grew louder. Julian's composure was cracking. And here, I continued, pulling up the offshore accounts, are the wire transfer destinations. Not just one account under Elena Rossi's name. 17 accounts across 8 countries, all feeding into a central trust registered to a shell corporation in Luxembourg. I zoomed in on the corporate registration. GTC Holdings Limited. Registered directors, Julian Carvello and... I paused for effect. Giovanni Castellano. The doc went silent. Every head turned to Castellano, one of the commission's senior members. That's impossible, Castellano said, his face draining of color. I never. You didn't, I agreed. But your identity was used to register the company, along with 4 other commission members whose credentials Julian had access to as your legal counsel. I advanced to the final screen, the one that would either vindicate us or get us killed. And here, I said quietly, is what Julian planned to do with all of this. The screen filled with email correspondence. Messages between Julian and someone identified only as Federal Contact J. Negotiations, offers, terms. Julian Carvello wasn't just stealing from the Bernardi family, I said. He was compiling evidence on every family in the commission, every illegal transaction, every associate, every operation. And he was negotiating to sell it, all of it, to federal prosecutors in exchange for immunity and a new identity. The silence that followed was absolute. I scrolled through the messages, each one more damning than the last. Offers of $30 million for the complete commission registry. Negotiations for witness protection. Plans to liquidate and disappear before anyone realized what had happened. He was going to destroy all of you, I said, looking at each commission member in turn. Not just the Bernardis. Every family, every territory, every operation you've built. He would have walked away rich while federal agents rolled up your entire organization. Dante's face had gone cold as winter. Carvello, is this true? Julian's mask finally shattered. You were all fools. Every one of you. Do you have any idea how easy it was? You handed me your secrets, your vulnerabilities, your identities. You trusted me because I was the respectable one. The lawyer. The professional. So you decided to sell us out, Ricci said, his hand moving toward his jacket. I decided to take what I was owed. Julian's voice rose, desperation bleeding through. I've cleaned up your messes for 30 years, protected you, shielded you, built legal frameworks that kept federal investigators at bay. And what did I get? A salary. While you lived like kings on empires I helped you build. So you destroyed the Bernardi family to teach us a lesson? Dante's voice was deadly quiet. I destroyed the Bernardi family because they were the easiest target. Old leadership dead. Young fool playing at being brutal. Weak brother ripe for manipulation. Julian laughed, the sound broken and bitter. Francesco was supposed to go down quietly. The ghost accountant was supposed to find evidence I'd planted. Francesco would be disgraced. And in the chaos, I'd vanish with my payday. But he pointed at me. She saw the pattern. She traced it back to me. So I had to accelerate. He pulled out his phone. And I still have insurance. One command, and everything I've compiled goes to 5 different federal field offices. You kill me, you destroy yourselves. No, I said quietly. You don't. I nodded to Marco. He pulled out a second tablet, showing a screen full of code. While your lawyers were springing you from custody, we hacked your backup system. Every file, every document, every piece of evidence you compiled, deleted. The federal contacts? We've sent them fabricated messages from you saying the deal is off, that you were paranoid and wasting their time. Your insurance just became worthless. Julian's face went white. He checked his phone, fingers flying across the screen. Then he looked up, and I saw the moment he realized it was over. You can't. This isn't. The commission doesn't execute its own counsel without. Article 12, Dante said, his voice like gravel. Betrayal of commission trust. Attempted sale of protected information to federal authorities. Conspiracy to destroy multiple family operations. He looked around at the other members. Vote. 12 hands raised. Unanimous. Dante nodded once. Fermin Bernardi. Fermin stepped forward, trembling. You were manipulated, Dante said. Used. But you still participated in actions that harmed your family and threatened commission stability. Your punishment is house arrest, full restitution of stolen assets, and 20 years service to the commission under your brother's supervision. Fail once and you join Carvello. Understood. Yes, sir, Fermin whispered.
Francesco Bernardi.
Dante turned to us. You and your wife have prevented a catastrophic breach. The commission owes you a debt. I don't want a debt, Francesco said. I want my family name cleared and my territory secured. Done. And as for Carvello, Dante gestured. 2 of his men grabbed Julian, who was still staring at his phone like it might save him. Wait. We can negotiate. I have other information. Take him, Dante said. They dragged Julian away, his protests echoing across the dock until a car door slammed and cut them off. Dante approached Francesco, extended his hand. Your grandfather would be proud. You've proven the Bernardi family can still bite. Francesco shook his hand. Thank my wife. She's the one who found everything. Dante turned to me, his expression unreadable. The ghost accountant. Julian underestimated you. We all did. People usually do, I said. It's my greatest advantage. He smiled, a brief, genuine expression. Welcome to the commission, Mrs. Bernardi. Something tells me you're going to make things very interesting. As the commission members departed and dawn broke fully over the port, Francesco pulled me close. We did it, he said. We survived it, I corrected. Now comes the hard part. Which is? I looked at the shipping container, at the evidence of Julian's betrayal projected on its side, at the empire we just saved from destruction. Building something better, I said. Something that doesn't eat itself from the inside. Francesco's smile was tired but genuine. Together, I agreed. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was seen. I was valued. I was exactly where I chose to be. 3 weeks later, I stood in my father's hospital room watching the cardiac monitor display steady, healthy rhythms. The best specialists in Europe had performed a procedure that should have been done years ago, and for the first time in months, his skin had color instead of that grayish pallor that had haunted me. Miriam, he said, his voice stronger than it had been in years. You don't have to keep visiting every day. I'm fine. Better than fine. I know. I adjusted the flowers on his bedside table, fresh ones, delivered daily from the Bernardi estate's greenhouse. But I like seeing you without wires and panic in your eyes. He reached for my hand, gripped it with surprising strength. What you did, saving the business, clearing our name, I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to thank me. You're my father. And Francesco? He's treating you well. I thought about the past 3 weeks. The long nights in the vault, restructuring the Bernardi financial systems. The dinners where Francesco consulted me on every major decision. The moments when he'd find me exhausted at my desk and physically carry me to bed, refusing to let me work myself into collapse. "He sees me," I said quietly. "For the first time in my life, someone sees me as more than just useful." My father's eyes misted. "Your mother would be proud. Not of the mafia marriage, she'd have had opinions about that, but of the woman you've become. Strong, brilliant, unbreakable." "I'm not unbreakable, Papa. I just learned how to bend without snapping." A knock at the door interrupted us. Marco stepped inside, his expression apologetic. "Mrs. Bernardi, there's someone downstairs demanding to see you." I didn't have to ask who. I'd been expecting this. Amber sat in the hospital lobby, looking diminished. Her designer dress was wrinkled, her hair less than perfect, her makeup unable to fully hide the circles under her eyes. When she saw me, something flickered across her face. Desperation mixed with the remnants of old spite. "Miriam." She stood, tried for a smile that didn't quite land. "I've been trying to reach you." "I know. I've been ignoring you. Look, I know things between us have been complicated, but we're family. And I'm in a really bad situation right now." I crossed my arms, let the silence stretch. "Julian's assets were all frozen," she continued, words tumbling out faster now. "The apartment he was renting for me, the credit cards, everything, it's all gone. I have nothing. And Mama, she won't even take my calls. She said I embarrassed the family by being involved with Julian, that I should have known better." "You should have," I said. I know I should have. But Miriam, please, I need help. Just enough to get on my feet, find a job, start over. You're married to one of the most powerful men in Italy now. Surely you can." "Can what?" "Give you money? Get you set up in some comfortable situation so you can continue being exactly who you've always been." Her face flushed. "I made mistakes. I'm sorry. What more do you want?" "I want you to understand what you did." I stepped closer, kept my voice low and even. "You forged documents that could have gotten my father killed. You threw me into a marriage with a man you believed was brutal and dangerous because you were too cowardly to face the consequences of your own actions. You spent years making me invisible, undermining me, ensuring I stayed in the background so you could shine. I was jealous." Amber's composure cracked. "You were smarter, more capable. Mama always said you'd end up running everything while I'd just be decorative. I hated you for it. And now I have nothing," she whispered. "And you have everything. So congratulations, Miriam. You won." I studied her. This woman who'd tormented me, who'd tried to sacrifice me to save herself. I waited for the satisfaction to come, for the vindication. But all I felt was tired. "I didn't win," I said. "I survived. There's a difference." I pulled an envelope from my jacket, one I'd prepared yesterday, knowing this moment would come. "This is a bank draft for 50,000 euros. It's enough to rent an apartment, enroll in some courses, start an actual career. What you do with it is up to you." Amber took the envelope with shaking hands. "Why?" "Because staying angry at you takes energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. Because you're broken and bitter, and that's punishment enough. And because Francesco was right, carrying other people's weight is what I do, even when they don't deserve it." I turned to leave. "Miriam," her voice stopped me. "For what it's worth, you deserved better than how I treated you. You always did." It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was acknowledgement, and sometimes that was enough. "Use the money wisely, Amber. It's the only help you're getting." I walked away and didn't look back. Francesco found me on the balcony of the estate's master suite, watching the sun set over the port in the distance. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "Marco said you gave Amber money. 50,000. That's generous, considering." "It's practical," I corrected. "Desperate people make stupid choices. I'd rather she have enough to survive than have her become someone else's problem, or worse, try to leverage what she knows about our business." Francesco's laugh rumbled through his chest into my back. Always thinking 3 moves ahead. I'm starting to think you'd make a better commission president than Dante. Don't tempt me. I have enough problems running your financial systems. Our financial systems, he corrected, turning me to face him. Which brings me to something I've been meaning to discuss. He pulled a document from his jacket. Not a blood oath contract. Not legal paperwork stamped with commission seals. Just a simple, handwritten agreement on expensive stationery. What's this? A real marriage contract, Francesco said. One between equals.
No colateral clauses, no treats, no coercion.
Just terms we both agree to. I scanned the document. It was surprisingly straightforward. Joint decision-making on all family business. Equal access to all accounts and operations. A clause ensuring my father's care continued regardless of what happened between us. And at the bottom, a dissolution clause. Either party could walk away with no penalties if the marriage became untenable. You're giving me an exit, I said, looking up at him. I'm giving you a choice. The thing you didn't have when this started. His hands cupped my face. I want you here, Miriam. Not because of a contract or because I need your skills, though I do. I want you here because you're my partner, my equal, the person who sees through my brutality to the man underneath. The man who carries people into bed when they won't stop working, I said, smiling. The man who found someone worth being better for. I looked at the contract, at the careful terms that protected both of us, that gave us both freedom to choose this every day. Then I looked at Francesco, this man who'd been shaped by violence and expectation, who'd played the monster to survive, who'd learned to trust me with the truth of who he was. I have one condition, I said. Name it. We transform this family. Really transform it. No more ghost shipments, no more questionable operations, no more living in the gray areas that men like Julian can exploit. We go legitimate. It'll take years, maybe decades, but we make the Bernardi name mean something other than fear. Francesco was quiet for a long moment. The commission won't like it. The commission respects strength. We show them there's more profit in legitimacy than in constantly looking over our shoulders. I traced the contract with one finger. We use my skills to clean the operations, your reputation to keep people in line during the transition, and for Min's connections to build bridges we couldn't build alone. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about this since I traced my first fraudulent transaction in that vault. I met his gaze. I didn't survive Julian's scheme just to maintain the same broken system that made him possible. I want to build something better. With you, if you're willing. Francesco took the contract, added a line in his elegant handwriting. The Bernardi family commits to full operational legitimacy within 10 years, with Miriam Bernardi as Chief Operating Officer and primary architect of organizational transformation. Then he signed it and handed me the pen. Thank you, he said softly, for being worth choosing. I signed below his name, Miriam Lucia Bernardi. Closed loop on the M. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else made me invisible. We stood together on the balcony as the last light faded from the sky. Below us, the port hummed with activity. Containers being loaded, ships departing for legitimate destinations, workers operating under fair contracts and proper oversight. The first steps of the transformation we'd committed to. It would be hard. The commission would resist. Old associates would push back. There would be setbacks and compromises and moments when going back to the old ways would seem easier. But I'd spent 26 years being invisible, fixing other people's problems, surviving in the margins. I wasn't invisible anymore, and I'd learned something in the chaos of the past month. The ghost who everyone overlooked had become the architect of a new empire. Francesco's hand found mine in the darkness. What are you thinking? That I spent my whole life being underestimated, I said. And now I'm going to use that to build something they never saw coming. They're going to call you ruthless. Good. Let them. Ruthless is just another word for woman who refuses to be erased. Francesco pulled me close, and in that moment, standing on the balcony of a mafia estate, planning the transformation of a criminal empire into something legitimate and lasting, I realized something. I'd been forced to marry my stepsister's brutal mafia fiancé. The outcome had shocked everyone, including me, because I hadn't just survived. I hadn't just exposed betrayal and saved my family. I found my voice, my power, my place in a world that had tried so hard to keep me invisible. And I was just getting started. Far below, the port lights flickered on one by one, illuminating the empire we'd saved and the future we'd build together. Not as boss and useful wife, but as equals, as partners, as the architects of something better than everything that had come before. "Ready?" Francesco asked. I squeezed his hand, smiled into the darkness. "I've been ready my entire life. I was just waiting for someone to notice." And together we walked back inside to begin the work of transforming an empire. One ledger, one decision, one day at a time. The ghost had become a force, and nothing would ever make me invisible again.